There are several times a week when I wake up in the morning and I ask myself, what in the world am I doing? I'm a 36-year-old man in 2023, and I'm waking up in an old rectory next to an old church in Old Town as a Catholic priest. 50 years ago, that would have made perfect sense. But now, it's odd. It's a different kind of thing, and sometimes the oddness catches up with me, especially when I talk to family members and friends who are so out of the world that I live in, to remind myself that, wow, I've made my whole life about faith, about service to God and His people. It strikes me how odd this is. And I have to remind myself of why I'm doing this. But I think it's good that not only I do this, I think it's good that you do this too. Why are you here this morning? What got you up out of bed to come to Mass this morning? I mean, the reality is that you and I, we are an endangered species. When you look at the demographics in the state of Maine, we've got about 25% of people who identify as Catholic, which is pretty good, especially for New England. It's pretty good. But only 10% of that 25 are coming to Mass, which throughout the whole state, that amounts to about 30,000 people coming to Mass on Sunday, which might seem like a lot of people, but when you think about the larger population, that's only a tiny fraction, which means you and I, we're an endangered species. And I kind of look at myself as the zookeeper. How do I keep us going? How do I keep us alive and well? Now, there are two different ways that we could look at this. We could look at this and say, okay, why have we lost so many people? What has led to their demise, so to speak? And that's, I think, an important question, but it's an uninteresting one. I think the far more interesting question is, what keeps us going? Why are we here? What keeps us thriving? When you read the news reports about these pandas in the zoo, it's not helpful to figure out why there are not more pandas. It's more helpful to figure out, how do we keep these pandas happy and healthy and going? And for you and I think that's the important place to land. Why are we Catholic? Why do we make coming to Mass a priority? Why do we give up our lives, our money, our time to make this, what we gather here to do on Sunday morning, a priority? And our answers to these questions are really important. Now, you're going to have loftier answers, and you're going to have less lofty answers. You're going to have some who say, I believe everything that the Lord teaches with all of my heart, and I want to serve Him, and I want to give my whole life to Him. Beautiful. Thanks be to God. And you're going to have answers like, well, Mom made me come to Mass this morning, right? Now, I want to say that no matter why you're here today, whether it's because Mom made you, or your husband or wife made you, or your conviction brought you, or your sense of duty brought you, whatever your reason, it's good that you're here. And while we may come up with any number of different reasons, practical reasons, intellectual reasons, emotional reasons, why we're here today, I want to posit that there is another reason, and that is God Himself. Whether we realize it or not, each one of us was drawn into this holy place this morning by the Creator of the universe, who pulled at our heart. Now, He might have had to do a little bit more pulling on some than others, but He's called all people to Himself. And you and I have answered that call, and we are here today. Thanks be to God for that. God is constantly working in people's lives, and He's constantly doing this. And He catches up with most of us at some point. St. Augustine wrote about this in his Confessions, how the God that he was longing for and searching for and desiring had actually been longing and searching and desiring for him way before. And that The moment of Augustine's conversion was when the two finally collided. God is not stagnant in heaven, waiting for his people to just begrudgingly come to him. He chases after us. The poet Francis Thompson, drawing great inspiration from St. Augustine, actually refers to God as the hound of heaven, who is just relentlessly coming after us to the deepest recesses of our hearts, calling us to himself. Whether we realize it or not, that's why we're here today. The very grace of God, who has called us out of darkness into his light, who has called us out of our beds into his church, who has called us out of the world into this great foretaste of heaven, which is the celebration of the sacred liturgy. And what you and I gather to do today, although we may be an endangered species and we may be only a fraction of the greater population, what we have gathered to do this morning is the most important thing that happens on the face of the earth, because this is where heaven and earth collide. This is where God and humanity meet. This is the moment of conversion. This is where God catches us and where we are caught up in him. And so he brings us here, but with one string attached. And it's a very big string, and at times it can feel overwhelming. And the string is this: he's given us all that he has, his own life, his own son. But he wants all that we have to give as well. Not from our wallets or our time or our talents, although those are all important, they're secondary. They flow from something else. He wants our hearts. He wants us to give of ourselves to him as wholly and entirely as he has given himself to us. And that longing that we have deep within our hearts, that longing for fulfillment, for lasting love, for happiness, we know that no other person or thing is going to satiate that desire. And the reason is because that's our longing for God. He's put that into us so that we would come to him. Now, in our gospel today, Jesus has some pretty serious words, but actually I think that they're beautiful. If we stay at the surface level, if we stay at the level of how human relationships work, these words are going to appear very petty and jealous. Jesus is saying, if you don't love me more than your mother and father, you're not worthy of me. If you don't love me more than your son or daughter, you're not worthy of me. If you don't do what I say, you're not worthy of me. Now, if we translate that to other relationships in our life, we're going to be like, I don't think so. You're crazy. Goodbye. What is Jesus telling us here? Is he being petty? Is he being unreasonable? Is he asking us to turn away from our mother and father, son and daughter, and to spend 24 hours a day in church? Is that what he's asking? No, not at all. These words are expressive of how he's created us. He's created us for himself. And as he gives himself entirely to us, as he's made us entirely for himself, for the sake of our own happiness, for the sake of our own flourishing, he wants us to make sure that our loves are ordered in this life, or we're going to find ourselves miserable. That's usually how human misery comes about, right? When we have our priorities askew, when we don't have things in right order. A person who wakes up every day, for example, and gives no thought to their family or friends, is looking out for number one, might have all the money in the world, might have the most beautiful house, but they're not going to have any love, and so their life is going to be miserable. So what's wrong there? Their love is unordered. They don't love the right things in the right order. And that's all that Jesus is telling us today. You have to love in the right order. And if you do not have God at the top of your ordered love list, nothing else is going to work. Now, that doesn't mean that the other loves that you have are bad. Love of mother and father, very good. Love of son and daughter, very good. But if those aren't first subordinated to the love of God, those relationships are not going to be able to be all that God has made them to be. And we're going to start getting them junked up. And, I mean, look at humanity. A lot of our problems come from hard relationships between family members and friends. Now, there are a lot of complicated reasons for this. But I do think if we step back enough, it's because more and more of us haven't got our loves figured out. If you and I can situate our lives and ourselves and our hearts, first and foremost, in the love of God, when we wake up every morning and realize that who we are not just a bunch of independent agents who can, do whatever we want with our lives without counting the cost. When we realize that we are children of God, that metaphysically, ontologically, at the very level of our being, we are completely dependent upon Him to exist. When we realize that, and when we give ourselves over to that, and then when we realize that this amazing Creator wants to be in a personal and deep relationship with us, that He wants to give us His love and that He wants to be loved by us. When we live in that truth, that will flow down to everything else that we do in this life. Not perfectly, but in a more wholesome and a holier manner. But this requires sacrifice on our end. It means that we can't wake up every day with a bunch of skewed loves or a bunch of skewed priorities. We've got to order them. We've got to get them right. And quite frankly, a lot of my time in my own life is struggling with that. And I know that you're doing the same thing too, because most of my week is sitting down with people who are struggling with the same thing. Problems in family, problems in work, problems with addiction, problems with anything, right? How do we fix this? Well, it's not just going to be your willpower. It's not just going to be by listening to a self-help tape. It's going to be by getting those loves in order. And love is not a feeling either. And I think that sometimes we think that it is, and when we don't feel it, we set ourselves up for failure, right? Because if I don't feel the love of God, then I must not have the love of God. So I might as well give it up and go do something else that makes me feel good, right? Give me my dopamine, give me my serotonin. That feels better. I'm going to do that. But if love is reduced to emotion or just a feeling, we're in big trouble. No, love is an action. Love looks like something, love manifests itself, and it's not always warm and fuzzy. In fact, most of the time, it's not. Love is about fidelity, love is about sacrifice, love is about doing for the other. And that's why, my friends, that it is very good that you are here this morning. Even if you are not having a tremendous religious experience, even if you are bored out of your mind, even if you are just hot and sticky and you can't wait to go eat donuts after Mass, it is good that you are here, and it is an act of love. And if you situate yourself in that act of love, you're going to grow in that act of love. And then you're going to be able to love in all of the other ways in a fuller, holier experience. This is what St. Paul is getting at in our second reading today, where he invites us to die with Christ. He's telling us, don't live your life as if you are trying to accumulate all the dopamine and serotonin that you possibly can. It will never be enough. It's funny, the scientists will show you, nobody ever says, you know what, I've reached my dopamine level, I'm good, thank you, right? No, you need more and more and more and more. And if that's what you're chasing, you're gonna be empty. So what is St. Paul saying? The opposite. Stop chasing all those things. Dare to die to yourself. In other words, dare to live in love for God and love of your neighbor. Live in fidelity, live in sacrifice. And when you do that, and when you join that death to Christ, you will rise with Him. Now, it might take 3 days. It might take some time. But it will happen. And my friends, that's where we find ourselves this morning. We're all over the lot. all of us. We're all in different places. Some have reached the heights of sanctity that I can't even begin to fathom, and others have just walked through the door and they have no idea what's going on in their spiritual lives. And most of us are somewhere in the middle. Our emotions are fickle, they go up and down every day. We have so many different options, so many different things vying for our attention. But what we hear today, in the midst of us gathered here, the endangered species that we are, is that the God of the universe loves us, and we love him. And that's why we're here. And that's why we keep coming back. And that's what we have to show the world. It doesn't do us any good to complain about all the reasons why people aren't here. When you and I can live in this truth and help others to see that this is what makes life worth living, that's what's going to help our endangered species to come more and more to life. Coming to Mass every Sunday, going to confession when you need to, sectioning out time to pray every day, even if it's just 5 minutes, engaging in the fasting life of the church, reading the scriptures, growing in the truth and understanding of our faith, bearing each other's faults patiently, not putting ourselves at the center of the universe. In other words, all of these things are little ways that we die to ourselves every day that help us to live and situate ourselves in the love of God. And it's a sacrifice, and it doesn't come with this shot of dopamine that we love so much, but it will give us life, and it will make life sweeter, and it will make our love deeper. And in a very true way, it'll make all of the other loves in our lives, the love that a father has for his son or daughter, the love that a mother has for her son or daughter, the love that children have for their parents, the love that friends have for each other. When we live and move and have our being in this deep sacrificial love of God, it will transform our entire lives. But there is a death that comes before that happens, and it is the daily death that we die to ourselves. That's what St. Paul is calling us into. That's why we sang Lift High the Cross as we came in at Mass this morning. We are lifting up this paradox, this mystery, that we are not going to find our lives in this world by going out and finding it. We're going to find it by giving them up. And there is beauty and truth in this. And that's what we celebrate today. So why are you here? Ask yourselves that. And you can find all of the subsequent secondary reasons for why that may be the case. But answer the question honestly, because it's true of everybody in here. You are loved by God. He brought you here. And even if you are kind of right down at the bottom in terms of your intention and your desire and your love, you are here because in some concrete way, right now, you are loving God. And that is awesome. Let's live in this love more and more every day. Let's feast on this love, literally, truly, in the sacrament of the Eucharist, and ask that God will grace us to have the strength and the guts to keep living in this until he calls us to our eternal homeland in the everlasting kingdom of his Father.